Welcome to the KPC Smart Money Podcast, where today we are going to be talking about inflation. Now, that's a hot topic these days because we are all in the middle of inflation. So, what causes inflation? But we're only going to touch on that for a few minutes because what people really want to know is, how do I beat it? How do I survive it? What do I do in the middle of high inflation? So, inflation is just simply put, it's an increase on what everything costs you. You are losing buying power. So the same dollar that you use to buy eggs or fill up your car with gas or milk or fast food or anything, it flat out buys you less. Your money is worth less. So in other words, with inflation, your money just doesn't go as far as it used to.
So I just want to know one thing. I mean, I kind of look at this from a common sense perspective. Why were eggs 84 cents a year ago? Then they went up to like $4.99 at Aldi's. Now they're back to $3.99. So my first thought, now this isn't really, from an economics textbook, but what happened? Did we have less chickens?
Actually, we did.
Did the chickens decide they didn't want to lay any eggs?
The chicken farms were catching on fire all over the country.
Who was doing that?
Who knows? That's the question of the day.
Okay, so we had less chickens, right? And so the chickens that were left had trouble laying eggs. I heard that.
Yeah.
That they just didn't lay as many eggs.
There was something in
their
food that had gone out that was keeping them from producing eggs. But so you're actually highlighting part of the problem. So people want eggs. It's cheap. It's a great way to stretch your budget. That is the demand side.
There you go.
And all of a sudden,
demand pull, that's called.
Right. And all of a sudden, we had several things occur that significantly reduced the supply side. But then on top of it, you add inflation.
Okay. So that's called demand pull. People still eat a lot of eggs. People like eggs. I love eggs. I mean, that's one of my favorite breakfast foods, and so
and it's used in baking. I mean, eggs are a staple in America.
Yeah, so you got less eggs, and you got more people that want just as many, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have a great demand. It's called demand pull. There's more demand than supply.
Yeah,
right. The old supply and demand thing, right?
Well, and so the egg situation went hand in hand with what's called cost push inflation, because supplies became limited. And when supplies become limited, well, prices are going to rise no matter what. More people trying to buy a less volume of a product is automatically going to cause the prices to go up.
Well, that would be kind of like during COVID, the situation with cars, right? Because something about the chips that were made in China or whatever that went into the computers that ran the engines, and they couldn't get them, and so therefore they couldn't produce enough cars. Well, people wanted to buy cars, and probably since they were locked down, you wanted to buy a lot of things because there wasn't anything left to do. So as soon as they were let out of the house by the government, they ran up to the car dealership, and there were no cars on the lot.
Well, and
so what happened to the price?
So the price went sky high, but then on top of that, in order to fill the supply side during COVID, rental car companies, people couldn't travel, so the rental car they sold off significant portions of their inventory.
Right.
Remember that first trip after COVID? You couldn't get a rental car.
People were driving around in Home Depot rental trucks and U-Hauls.
Yes, so
on their vacation.
So that was definitely a problem with the supply. Way more demand than supply. But, there's also just built-in inflation that you're always going to see. And that's, people want to make more money. Okay, so you've got people working for large companies, and employees want to have raises, and, they want to have better insurance and all of those things that you want. Well, the company just passes that right along to the consumer. It just means the price to produce everything gets higher.
So when you increase the money supply, when you print money,
that's the biggie.
All right. So you want to talk about that?
No, go ahead.
Well, okay. So you have all this extra money floating around, right? So that's going to, in effect, increase the prices. So increased money supply, it's just a first thing you learn in Finance 101. If the increased money supply increases inflation. Amen.
Yeah, so when you got the government who wants to give stimulus that they can't pay for, so they go to the printing machines and they just start churning out dollars. So in essence, the inflation that we are in right now, I hate to say it, is a self-inflicted wound by the Biden administration.
Yeah, right. So, okay, we're going to get political today?
No,
it's the truth. No, it's the truth. So you pass a bill where you're going to have 1.7 trillion in the new stimulus. What was it called? I forget what the bill was called.
Omnibus. It was so it was so big. They just called
they put Omni on it.
Exactly. Yeah. Omnibus. It just meant really big, out of control spending.
So guess what happens when you increase? Look at it this way: a pitcher of Kool-Aid. What happens to a pitcher of Kool-Aid when you add more water? What happens to the Kool-Aid?
Well, you get more Kool-Aid, but it's diluted.
It's diluted. So when you have the money supply and you increase the money supply, the money isn't worth as much.
Right. So that's how we got here. So how do we survive through it? And there are a few ways that you can do to help protect your savings. And really, we really wish the government would pull in the reins and stop spending, but it doesn't look like they're going to. So unfortunately, we as the consumers have to. And so one of the suggestions in inflation, reduce discretionary spending. Not so many trips to Starbucks. Maybe not so many over the road trips with gasoline. You're not going out. You'll see people not going out to eat as much anymore. And maybe you really wanted to buy that new refrigerator or that new oven
or clothes. Or you don't need, unless you absolutely need the new shirt, don't buy it.
Right. But also on major purchases that you've got that are coming up or that you would like, well, can you delay it a year or a year and a half until some of this inflation comes down? So put off those big purchases. And, it's easy when things are going great and, say your car, breaks down or a major appliance breaks down. Well, when you 2 years ago, when you went and looked at the prices, you're like, oh, hey, let's just get a new one. Well, not so much anymore. Maybe it's better to repair things than it is to replace them right now.
So have you heard that lately that inflation, went way, way, way up? And of course, what we're hearing on the news, right, which I don't trust at all, is that inflation is coming back down, right? So, but do you see the prices going back down? Do you see any prices going down?
This one's an easy one to tell if they're lying or not, because you are out there in the world experiencing it all the time. But
I don't see any prices going down.
Yeah, me neither. And again, that can be a little bit of corporate greed, but you are correct. And so the temptation during times of inflation, though, and we're seeing a lot of people do it, is okay. Well, then I'll just put it on the credit card and I'll pay it over time. Don't do that. You do not want to put yourself in a debt hole right now. In fact, if you've got credit cards or you've got any high interest loans, you should be working even harder during periods of inflation to get those paid off. I mean, try and consolidate some of those credit cards into those great 0% cards that'll let you get 18% or 18 months or 12 months over 0%. Start doing stuff like that. Start attacking any loans or credit cards that you have that are at high interest rates.
I know you're going to accuse me of going down a rabbit hole here, but I was just watching a show last night, some kind of talk show. I forget what it was, but they were talking about shrinkflation. Are you familiar with that term?
No.
Okay. Shrinkflation is when you buy a can of Pringles, and you open the can of Pringles and it's half full.
Oh, Burger King just lost a lawsuit about that.
They were talking about that, and Taco Bell. Like that takes two hands to a Whopper. Well, it doesn't anymore.
Yeah, and they're saying that false advertising because they're showing this big, fat, juicy hamburger up on the menu, and then you get it, and it's a scrawny little thing, and it's still called the Whopper. They lost that suit, by the way. But here's some other things that are a little more out of the box, and it has to do with how do you get money in to your budget? Because you can't all just walk in and go, "Hey, I want a 10% raise because inflation's up." But we actually had a client who just did this, and it was brilliant. She's a widow, and she's got a nice size house, and she's renting out a room. Wham! She now has hundreds of dollars coming in every month on an asset she was not using, i.e., a bedroom. Some people will get a second job. They call this now, like Uber drivers and all of that kind of stuff that, people are doing that a lot just to bring in extra income.
So we talked to, or I did talk to one of our clients that retired, and she said, I have to get out of this company. The new boss is driving me crazy. I think it's affecting my health. I just have to get away from these people. And she retired, and she said, okay, well, how are we going to do? Let's go over our retirement blueprint and all that. And then she said, oh, by the way, I got a job. And I said, you did?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, yeah. She goes, it's going to be in the medical, but it's not going to be a high stress type environment with like super hard quotas and a boss breathing down my neck. So it's not near as much money, but it'll supplement my Social Security, and I won't have to take as much money out of my savings.
Perfect. And we'll wrap this up with one other quick idea. If you're in the stock market and you've got and you're investing, well, there are certain stocks or industries that do well in inflation. Food is one, the energy sector is another, and medicine is another. So you may want to migrate some of your investments towards, energy, gas, food, anything that has to do with food and certain medicines. So there are stocks that do well in inflation. So do your research or give us a call at 877-KPC-PLAN. Well, I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Not that anybody enjoys inflation, but I hope you can get something out of the tips on how to fight inflation.
You've been listening to the KPC Smart Money Podcast with Kevin and Karen Christ. To listen to more episodes, visit kpcsmartmoney.com. You can also find the KPC Smart Money Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, and Stitcher.
KPC Financial Solutions is an independent financial services firm that utilizes a variety of investment and insurance products. Investment advisory services offered only by duly registered individuals through KPC Financial Solutions, LLC, a registered investment company. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any reference to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying ability of the issuing carrier. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual's situation. KPC Financial Solutions is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during the show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by KPC Financial Solutions. Hypothetical examples have been provided for illustrative purposes only. It does not represent a real-life scenario and should not be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual's situation.